Dear Black Horror Stories, fans, today, prepare to be gripped by fear as we unveil 3 bone-chilling tales sent to us by our followers via email. These stories delve into the realms of the unexplainable, recounting encounters with darkness that left our contributors trembling in their wake. Don't forget to show your support by leaving a like and dropping a comment to help our channel thrive. Now, brace yourselves for the spine-tingling tales that await. Welcome to the first story, a devilish encounter while giving birth. It was a night like any other, or so I thought. The hospital room was bathed in an eerie glow, the silence broken only by the soft hum of medical equipment. I lay in my bed, my body heavy with exhaustion, awaiting the arrival of my newborn daughter. But as the minutes stretched into hours, a sense of unease settled over me, a feeling of being watched by unseen eyes. I brushed it off as mere paranoia, chalking it up to the stress of impending motherhood. But then I saw it. A shadow, darker than the deepest abyss, lurking in the corner of the room. My breath caught in my throat as I watched its form shift and writhe, tendrils of darkness reaching out like grasping fingers. My heart raced with fear as the shadow drew nearer, its presence suffusing the air with a palpable sense of dread. I tried to scream, but my voice died in my throat, choked off by the oppressive weight of its gaze. "We need you," it whispered, its voice a chilling echo in the stillness of the night. "Are you willing to help us? Do you think you're ready for this?" I recoiled in terror, my mind racing with questions. What did it want from me? And why had it chosen this moment, on the eve of my daughter's birth, to reveal itself? Before I could gather my thoughts, I felt a strange sensation, a pulling at the very essence of my being, as if my spirit was being forcibly wrenched from my body. Panic seized me as I fought against the invisible bonds, screaming out in terror as I felt myself being torn asunder. "No, I don't want this," I cried, my voice raw with fear. "Leave me alone." And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the sensation ceased, and I found myself back in my body, gasping for breath as sweat beaded on my brow. The shadow lingered for a moment longer, its form flickering like a dying flame, before vanishing into the darkness once more. I lay there in the silence of the room, my heart still racing, my mind reeling from the encounter. What had just happened? And what did the shadow mean by its cryptic words? There was a pivotal moment during my daughter's birth, a moment of agony and despair that would forever haunt my memories. The labor was long and arduous, each contraction feeling like a tidal wave crashing over me, threatening to pull me under. The pain was relentless, a searing agony that seemed to consume me from the inside out. I screamed and writhed in agony, tears streaming down my cheeks as I begged for relief. But there was none to be found, only the relentless march of time as each contraction brought me closer to the brink of despair. And then, finally, after what felt like an eternity, my daughter was born. But the ordeal was far from over. The placenta failed to deliver, leaving me writhing in agony as the pain intensified with each passing moment. I cried out for help, but the medical staff seemed oblivious to my suffering, their attention focused solely on the newborn in my arms. I felt abandoned, lost in a sea of pain and despair as I struggled to make sense of the nightmare unfolding around me. The next day, I was allowed to leave. That same day, I felt extremely cold, shivering uncontrollably. When I woke up the next day, I was sick as a dog, barely able to move because of the intense pain. I researched online and realized it was most likely afterbirth pains. I was bedridden, feeling like I was dying. At the third day, I called the doctor, and he confirmed it was afterbirth pains. The pain I felt was inhuman. I couldn't describe it. I groaned, screamed, and could barely talk from the pain. My husband called for an ambulance, but they said there were no available. The only thing the doctor could do was send medication through my husband for the pain. The painkillers did nothing for me. I had to call doctors from private clinics. They wanted $150 for their help. I didn't have the money at that moment, and I couldn't bear the pain anymore. My guardian angel, my mother, said, "You're dying from the pain. Let me pay for it, darling. Your health is more important to me than the money." I said, "Mom, forget it." Eventually, my mother insisted and called those doctors, an obstetrician and a gynecologist. They couldn't find my address at first, but eventually they did. Every movement they made with my body or wherever they touched caused me immense pain. I just screamed. It was as if I were going insane. God, I can't bear it anymore. I'm dying. This is over. I don't want to live like this. I don't want to leave my daughter. But this pain is unbearable, I cried. My temperature was taken. Fever, 40 degrees. The gynecologist pressed on my stomach and then inserted her finger into my vagina. Only dirty black blood came out. They were placental remains. I had developed an infection. They seemed very concerned and said, "She needs to go to the hospital urgently. Now. She's dying." They pulled my husband aside to explain the seriousness of the situation to him. I knew it wasn't good news because I saw him burst into tears. I remember being lifted in a white sheet and then onto a stretcher to be taken to the ambulance, which arrived shortly after. I felt the life draining out of me. I grew weaker and weaker. Suddenly, I became aware that the black shadow was beside me again. It didn't say anything, but was observing everything. My grandmother also appeared, holding my hand. She didn't speak either. Just so, you know, my grandmother had been dead for years by then. So, her sudden appearance to me was very strange. That's when I knew I wouldn't survive this, because often people who witness their loved ones dying see deceased family members at the end. Well, that happened to me too. Grandma was there to take me. Once at the hospital, I was admitted urgently. I was told my pelvis had shifted. And as the doctors had said before, I had developed a severe infection. I was rushed to the operating room. The doctors did their best to treat me. I spent 2 weeks on the brink of life and death. I strongly felt my grandmother's presence during these 2 weeks, as if she were protecting me. I saw her walking around my bed and looking at me with concern. Gradually, I got better, and I didn't die. I was convinced that God and my grandmother had watched over me. After the 2 weeks, I was allowed to go home. A month later, when I could walk again, I visited my mother to spend some time with her. While I was talking to her, my mobile phone suddenly rang. I looked at the screen and saw Mom. My mother asked me why I suddenly looked at her. I showed her that she was calling me. Her mobile phone was right next to her, and it wasn't in use, she pointed out. I didn't understand it. I accepted the call anyway to see what would happen. "Hello, who's this?" I asked. I didn't get an answer. I heard someone listening on the other end of the line. This lasted for about a minute. someone listening. Then the person ended the call. Very strange. I immediately got goosebumps all over my body. And so, dear followers, I leave you with this question. If faced with the choice between light and darkness, between life and death, what would you do? Would you heed the call of the shadow, or would you turn away, clinging to the fragile threads of hope that bind us to this world? For me, the answer became clear in a dream in which my grandmother appeared, her gentle voice a soothing balm to my troubled soul. She explained to me the true nature of the shadow, the dark entity that had sought to claim me as its own. It was a demon, my dear, my grandmother whispered, her words echoing in the depths of my mind. A creature of darkness, seeking to lure you into its realm. But you resisted, and for that, you have suffered. The pain you endured was the price of your defiance, a reminder of the consequences of crossing into the abyss. As I listened to her words, a sense of clarity washed over me, dispelling the lingering doubts that had clouded my mind. I understood now that my suffering had not been in vain, that it had been a test of my resolve, a trial by fire to prove my strength. And so, as I lay in my bed, cradling my daughter in my arms, I made my decision. I would not succumb to the darkness that sought to claim me. I would not abandon the light that burned within me, the light that had guided me through the darkest of nights. For I knew now that my path lay not in the shadows, but in the brilliance of the dawn, where hope and courage awaited me. And though the road ahead would be fraught with peril, I would face it head on, armed with the knowledge that I was not alone. Beware the whispers of the darkness, for they seek to ensnare the unwary and lead them astray. Hold fast to the light that shines within you, and never forget that even in the darkest of times, hope remains. Welcome to Story 2. She's bewitched by her partner. My name is Lysandra, and this is my personal story of an experience I had. I know a bisexual woman whom we'll call Chantal in this story. I met her through Cindy, a good friend of mine, but I don't consider her a friend due to her annoying, intrusive, and antisocial ways. Chantal is very ill-mannered, never knows how to behave in public, and brings shame to our friend group whenever we're out with her. I strongly feel that she hasn't been brought up with proper values and norms at home. You could say she has ghetto manners. One beautiful sunny day, I was busy with my phone and fell asleep. I had a dream where I was at someone's home whom I didn't know. But she kept trying to chase me away. For some reason, I didn't want to leave and stayed there. She kept trying to push me away, but I just wouldn't budge. She came back to me after a while and said, "Now you must go home. Just finally leave from here." I said, "Yes, okay, I'm going home already. But I wish you all the best. I hope you get better and things go well for you." She had a smile on her face, and I don't know why I wished her well. Suddenly, an unknown man approached me and said, "Give this perfume to the lady there. It's a good, strong scent." I thought to myself, what is this guy talking about? How can I give someone perfume when I don't even know them? Mind you, I didn't know anyone in that dream. They were all strangers to me, and I didn't understand any of it. He repeated to me, "Give this perfume to the lady. The man gave it to you. Put a lid on it." Then I woke up. I first told my friend Cindy about the strange dream I had about perfume. She also wanted to know what the dream meant. Then I told two gentlemen I'm in contact with about my dream, I occasionally need help because I don't know what these dreams mean. I messaged Andy, a good friend, first and told him about my dream. He told me that the dream wasn't about me. According to him, the dream was about one of my friends. She's currently in big trouble, he said. Since he wasn't sure which of my friends it was, I messaged all of them to ask if everything was okay. They all said everything was fine, and it didn't seem like anyone was having problems. I presented my dream to another gentleman, Benito, but due to his busy schedule, he didn't always respond to my messages, even though I noticed he had much more knowledge about dreams than Andy. I let the topic rest and didn't think about it anymore. Benito replied to my messages after about 2 or 3 days, and because he knows my circle of friends quite well, he knew exactly who my dream was about. He asked me if Chantal had arranged the culture bath that she needs to take, to which I replied that I didn't think so. That girl is stubborn and doesn't listen to anyone, I said. As Benito told me, I received the dream for this reason, that Chantal needed to do her cultural stuff as soon as possible. Otherwise, it will end bad. I was dreading confronting her about this because, as I mentioned earlier, I didn't see her as a friend. Moreover, even if I did confront her, the question was whether she would take it seriously. It's hardly possible to have a proper conversation with her. It seems like she sees everything as a joke. Whenever someone tries to address her actions that are not acceptable, she never understands. Because of this reason, it has never been enjoyable for me to be around her. When I started to realize that this was about Chantal, I immediately texted Cindy and told her that the dream was about her friend. She said, "Oh, so all that time your dream was about Chantal? Now that you mention it, this reminds me. I was at Chantal's place the day before you had your dream about the perfume, and there was something on her wardrobe with feathers on it. I found it quite strange, but I didn't want to ask what it was exactly, because there were 2 of her housemates in that bedroom. So I just let it go and kept quiet. But if that's it, then it's something good." A couple of days after hearing this, I went north, where Chantal lives. She rented a house there with 2 others. And of course, each had their own room in that house. So did Chantal. So I went into her bedroom and immediately saw that thing on her wardrobe. I don't know how to describe it. I saw a big cultural bowl with large feathers attached to it, tied around with a red clothing on her wardrobe. That thing was so eerie to see. It gave me chills all over my body, and I could feel the negative energy coming from that bowl, even from a distance. I asked Chantal how she was doing, and she said everything was fine. "So, you brought that thing?" I asked, pointing to the bowl. "Oh, my mother-in-law referred me to some kind of voodoo priest, and I went there. That man told me my soul was dirty, so he prepared that bowl for me to take," she said. As I mentioned at the beginning of my story, Chantal is bisexual, and despite having secret adventures with men sometimes, she also has a serious relationship with a woman, and her mother-in-law referred her to that voodoo priest. "I don't think that thing is something good," I said about the bowl. She said she also wanted to know what the thing exactly was because she was clueless. I took a photo of that bowl and showed it to Benito. He said that something like that could never be good. If you give something like that to someone and the person has ill intentions towards you, they can literally do anything they want with you, were his words. But because because Chantal is under her partner's strong influence, I couldn't say anything to her. She didn't want to hear anything about it and thought I was just worrying for no reason. I discussed this matter with Cindy. Although we both found it regrettable, we couldn't do anything for someone who didn't want to be helped. Cindy said she now understood why Chantal's partner never left her, even though Cindy had cheated countless times. Even all the money Chantal had went to her partner. It was so bad that she almost starved herself just so Cindy wouldn't lack anything. No wonder Chantal had become so thin, because she only ate when her housemates happened to cook. Furthermore, she was always broke, so she didn't look very healthy. She didn't have a job, so she didn't have an income either. The money she got came from relationships with male admirers. Just like the way the money came in, she gave it all to her partner Cindy and didn't keep anything for herself. Chantal was the man in the relationship, and her partner was the woman. Benito advised me to leave the matter as it is because we couldn't force her to get help. As long as she doesn't speak up herself and ask for help, there's nothing we can do, he said. I agreed with him and went to visit my grandmother the same day to see my daughter. I swear to you, between 1 and 4 in the morning, I just couldn't fall asleep, and neither could my daughter. I slept next to her in bed. Normally, she sleeps very deeply, but this time, she just couldn't. She was very restless, and this was unusual for her. She kept waking up, and the same happened to me whenever I fell asleep. I strongly felt like something was wrong, and I think my daughter felt it unconsciously too. As the days passed, the sense of unease surrounding Chantal's situation only grew stronger, gnawing at the edges of my mind like a persistent shadow. I couldn't shake the feeling that something sinister was lurking just beyond the veil of reality, waiting to pounce with claws bared and fangs gleaming. Despite my attempts to warn Chantal, she remained steadfast in her belief that everything was fine. But deep down, I knew better. I had seen the ominous bowl with feathers in her room, felt the malevolent energy radiating from its twisted form. And I couldn't simply stand by and watch as darkness consumed her soul. It was a moonless night when I received an unexpected visitor at my door. Andy stood before me, his features etched with concern, as he pressed a small vial of oil into my trembling hands. "This is for Chantal," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's protection oil. She needs it now more than ever." With a sense of urgency burning in my chest, I rushed to Chantal's house, the darkness pressing in around me like a suffocating shroud. The air was heavy with the weight of impending doom. Every step forward, a battle against the forces of evil that sought to keep us apart. When I arrived, Chantal greeted me with a smile, oblivious to the danger that lurked just beyond her doorstep. But as I recounted my dream and the warnings from Andy and Benito, her expression shifted from disbelief to fear. Together, we stood in her dimly lit room, the silence thick with anticipation, as Chantal anointed herself with the protection oil. But as the incantation fell from her lips, a chill swept through the air, sending shivers down my spine. Suddenly, the room was engulfed in darkness, the candles flickering and dying in an instant. I could feel the presence of something malevolent lurking in the shadows, its icy breath brushing against my skin like a whispered threat. But then, just as all hope seemed lost, a blinding light filled the room, banishing the darkness and illuminating Chantal's tear-streaked face. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated triumph as we watched the demon's hold over her crumble into dust. But the victory was short-lived as the room began to shake and tremble, the very foundations of reality threatening to collapse around us. I clung to Chantal's hand with all the strength I had, refusing to let go, even as the world seemed to unravel before my eyes. And then, in a deafening roar of sound and fury, the demon was vanquished, its anguished cries echoing into the void as it was cast back into the depths of hell from whence it came. As the dust settled and the echoes faded into silence, Chantal and I stood amidst the wreckage of our ordeal, our hearts pounding in our chests as we caught our breath. But despite the chaos and the terror that had threatened to tear us apart, we emerged stronger and more resilient than ever before. In the days that followed, Chantal underwent a profound transformation, shedding the shackles of her past and embracing a newfound sense of freedom and clarity. And as for me, I found solace in knowing that I had played a crucial role in her salvation, that my actions had helped to banish the darkness and usher in a new era of hope and possibility. Welcome to the third story. They tried to kill me with voodoo. It was in 2022 when I was at work and felt pain in my foot. It was an incredibly busy day at work, and I was constantly on the move. I walked back and forth, thinking that the pain I felt was due to that. But when the pain persisted and seemed to get worse, I decided to investigate the cause of my pain. I then saw on the bottom of my foot, between my big toe and the next toe, a pimple with a sort of white tip where pus seemed to be. I had such terrible pain that I can't describe in words, and this pain seemed to get worse and worse over time. Eventually, I couldn't walk normally anymore, and working in this way was simply not possible anymore. Fortunately, it was around closing time when I discovered this pimple, so I could go home. My employer suggested calling a doctor to have my foot checked, and so I did. The doctor said I could come by the next day. The next morning, I immediately went to the doctor, and they treated the pimple. They squeezed the pimple after injecting anesthesia twice. When the anesthesia took effect, they cut open the swollen pimple with a new razor blade. Due to a shortage of medical supplies given the situation in the country, they didn't have a scalpel to cut open my pimple. I refused to leave without drastic measures being taken to remove all the dirt from the pustule. I was also the one who came up with the idea to cut open the pimple with a razor blade. I wasn't planning to go back there another day with the same complaints, so I wanted this to be over quickly so I could go home. After cutting it open, the doctor cleaned the wound from the inside and prescribed me some medication. Just before I left his practice, he said, "After 3 days, you'll be back to normal, and you can walk normally as if nothing ever happened." I was extremely satisfied and went home super happily. Days went by, and the pimple had become a wound and remained moist. No matter what I did, I couldn't dry the wound. It continued to look unhealthy, red, swollen, and moist. I became quite desperate because I had thought this was a tiny pimple that would go away soon. But this turned out not to be the case at all. I tried everything imaginable to heal the wound, and everything failed. The wound only got worse and worse. The pain was unbearable. I became depressed. I cried every day about my foot, asking myself when all this would be over. 2 months passed, and my sister once asked me if she could help me with her own medicine. I didn't know exactly what she meant, what medication she had in mind, but I was desperate, and I wanted to try anything that could bring relief. I said yes to everything. Mind you, I just wanted to get better. I was so fed up with all of this. That sister of mine came over one evening. She prayed for my foot. She prepared a sort of bath for me consisting of water, palm oil, bluing, and a few other ingredients unknown to me. During the prayer, she had a bowl in her hand, which suddenly fell over by itself. I found this strange, but didn't understand what it meant. After bathing, I asked her what would happen now, and she said, "After 3 days, your foot should be better. I am very sure that the problem you have now is not a doctor's disease." I didn't know what to hear and asked in turn, "Who would want to harm me then?" She explained to me that during that bath, she had asked to make the culprit known to her in a dream. The next morning, I called her nervously to ask if she had had the dream. She said, "Yes, I had a dream with a dark lady in it. She had long, smooth hair, and she had a hat on." This description gave me goosebumps all over my body because I knew almost immediately who this was about. The description matched somebody that I know at work. Before I got that wound on my foot, I worked with a lady who was incredibly jealous of me. Everything I did, she did shortly afterward too. She kept an eye on me all the time, and she seemed to be obsessed with me. Everyone noticed that she did this, and it didn't feel good to me. It was just very creepy when someone watches everything you do and then does everything the same way afterward. My sister, I'll call her Melissa in this story, didn't know her at all, so she couldn't have known this, let alone how my former colleague looked. I immediately asked Melissa what I should do with this information. "Let me WhatsApp an aunt of mine who knows more about these things. I will ask her what you can do in this situation, and then I will let you know as soon as I know more," she said. Melissa sent photos of my foot to that aunt, and she replied, "This is black magic. She will lose her foot if she doesn't find help very quick." I read the message and burst into tears. I really wondered why this had to happen to me, because I didn't deserve this. I've always been nice to others, always made sure to treat everyone correctly, and as far as I knew, I had no enemies. I'm just not a difficult person, and I knew that the person who did this to me did it out of pure jealousy. I then approached an aunt of mine, and she took my problem very seriously. She immediately took me to someone who might be able to help me. It was an old man she brought me to. I told the grandpa why I was there, and he was willing to help me right away. Fortunately, he saw the seriousness of the situation. He said, "Lie down on that bench." I complied, and he looked at the wound on my foot. He then sucked on the wound with his mouth. Yes, with his mouth, he sucked on my nasty, dirty, stinking wound. He kept sucking until a pretty large splinter, at least that's what it looks like, or sharp piece of wood, came out of the wound. This was exactly why the wound couldn't heal, because there was a pretty large object in my foot. How this got there is also a big mystery to me. In any case, this is not a normal occurrence, because I didn't bump into anything, and I would have felt it if I had hit my foot normally. The object has been tampered with in an unnatural, devilish way, and thus ended up in my foot. It was clearly intended to harm me, or even get rid of me. I had to walk with that thing in my foot for so many months, and had so much pain, fear, and sorrow, because I thought I would lose my foot. I was in mortal terror, and And this was something you wouldn't wish on anyone. And yet there were people who just didn't want me to see the light of day, and who did this to me. That old man prayed for me and then gave me an oil to put on my wound every day. Believe it or not, people, my wound was completely dry after just one day. I could just see how healthy it started to look. I have never been so happy and full of emotions. I write this to you now. I can just walk normally again. I have no more pain now. I can do everything again. There is a God, and He is greater than everything.